Welcome, family and friends. This presentation is by special request. A regular viewer wanted to know if time travel is real, and if it is so, how is it possible? I have experienced enough with matters beyond the veil to say without a shadow of a doubt that time travel is very real, even teleportation for that matter. I'm going to break this down in the most elementary way possible. Alright, so let's get started. The reasons how and why time travel and even teleportation is possible is because of the very basic nature of how reality is structured. You've heard me and others say time and time again that there is no solidity in the way we perceive with the human mind. This point lays the very foundation to how and why these seemingly impossible or even magical things are not only possible, but a reality of life for those who have evolved to the level of understanding and mastery. Now take a look at this image. Within this image, we see a painting on a flat canvas. The painting is by a brilliant artist by the name of Georges Seurat. I hope I said the last name correctly. Although this image is a flat, one-frame, one-dimensional image, it is how this picture was formatted that makes it exceptional. You see, this painting was formulated with many dots. From a distance, the image appears connected and fixed, but at a closer glance, we will see the details in the image. As the old saying goes, art imitates life, just as technology is used to copy or imitate nature. Case in point, if we were to zoom in close enough to any photo or video film, we will see pixels, and those pixels in these still frames images will be the equivalent of what atoms would be in our physical reality. As an artist, this person formulated this image in his mind, and he used his hand to paint the image on a flat, one-dimensional surface. Our physical reality is shaped and formed in a similar fashion. However, in our 3D and animated realities, we individually and collectively create still frames countless times per second by way of mind and thought projections. We're like creators and artists using atoms and energy particles to shape our creation or perspective. Now look around you. Everything we see is infinite layers of atoms and subatomic particles vastly layered, and each layer vibrates at a specific frequency. The heavier and more dense a form or structure is, the more stacked, compact, and layered it is with particles and atoms. The lighter and more fluid the form or structure is, the less compact and layered the realm of existence is. Just like the painting I use as a premise, our reality isn't really fixed, solid, or real in the way we believe or perceive it to be. It's all a mind projection created within infinite bandwidths, within time and space. Once those frames are projected onto the time and space continuum, they remain imprinted, much like a completed movie on a film strip. I will continue to say everything that we see are actually atoms, layered, stacked, and condensed to various degrees. Atoms are within themselves hollow. Now imagine infinite numbers of these particles vibrating at different rates and frequencies all throughout infinity. Atoms are the building blocks of life. Alright, now take a look at this image that I put together myself for a video that I had done about 4 years ago, showing a very basic breakdown on how our mind and consciousness shapes and creates. On your far right hand corner, you will see, quote, the all, and that term represents all of outer space, which is infinite. I would even say that this infinite space will be the equivalent of one mind, and we are all compartmentalized, smaller fragmented minds within this one infinite or almighty and all-encompassing mind. The oversoul would be the equivalent to our higher mind. The higher mind projects and oversees all activities beyond time and space all at once. The higher mind projects consciousness through the lower mind, and the lower mind projects and experiences matter by way of energy streams, spirit, and layers upon layers of particles which we would constitute as matter. Now imagine this black background, which would be the equivalent of our mind's canvas. Outer space is also the equivalent to our bandwidth on a computer. The pixels, aka atoms, are your building blocks, and your mind is the creator of those building blocks, and your consciousness is experiencing each of those frames and constructs from a subjective point of view. Now let's say that this is my human form and imprint within time and space, and let's say that I wanted to travel from point A to H. What must happen for this to occur? I must set forth the intent and will to move forward. As I do so, my mind will project the many number of frames needed to shift my perspective from one point to another in a linear fashion, one frame at a time. But it is my spirit and conscious mind that is perceiving the movement forward through each frame in a subjective manner. Every single frame projected or recorded within their respective bandwidth generates a unique corresponding binary code and coordinate. Each and every frame and every image within the frame. Now wrap your minds around that one for a second. The binary code encodes the location and respective information that created that unique expression and imprint. As all of this is being experienced and generated, my higher mind self is perceiving each frame all at once, but the almighty mind, which we will call God or the All, is perceiving all that there is all over the place all at once. From a human mind's perspective, this is really mind-boggling, but we are all doing it without even realizing it. Now let's say that I, in my dense physical form, wanted to travel from point A to point B without projecting any consciousness through all of the frames in a linear fashion. From a biological, physical perspective, I could do this three ways. The first would be to simply shift my consciousness by way of astral projecting a lesser dense astral or etheric form by way of will and thought. Or I can get my physical body into a time machine. The time machine basically speeds up and slows down every single particle within and around the machine and shifts its entire structure to the timeline, location, and coordinate of interest. So there's really no actual time traveling. It's just changing the rate of vibration and frequency to match the place or location of interest. The final way in which I could experience time travel would be to project some consciousness into an energy bubble and project it outside of the timeline frames to view the location or realm of interest. Let me quickly touch on teleportation while we're at it. And this is achieved very similar to the mode of travel that I've just touched on. From a dense physical perspective, to teleport would require a technical device that will speed up every cell, molecule, and particle within the body, turning it into a more fluid waveform. The elevated waveform is then transferred to a machine or device designed to slow down the waveform in its original state within its desired location. Basically, it's kind of like dismantling a structure and pulling it from one place and putting it back together in another. You guys send me videos and articles to look at all of the time, and one of you guys sent me a video of a channel by the name of Daryl Anka, who channels an entity by the name of Bashar, and he gave a great analogy or metaphor to paint the picture of how reality is really being projected and created in time and space. He used the analogy that I totally agree with. The analogy was and is that when we look at a movie being projected on the screen, we are given the illusion of movement, but the movement is actually created by millions of steel frames being projected through a movie reel and projected onto a screen. From the audience perspective, we see a beginning, middle, and end, but from a director or higher point of view, looking at the entire film script, you can go to the middle, beginning, and end at any point. Once again, the same is occurring within time and space as millions, billions, and even zillions of frames per second, depending on the rate of vibration and level of consciousness and dimension that we are on, are being projected and recorded in the time-space continuum. Each frame and movement is encoded in their respective fabric, but with the right technology, intent, and or focus point, these recordings and projections can be accessed and even altered from their respective timelines as we understand it. Now let's take a look at these frames stacked on top of one another. These lines within the frames represent frequencies of movement. The lower frame represents a reality of a slower rate of frequency and vibration. The top levels represent a faster rate of frequency and vibration. Although the frames are lined up at the same distance, we can see that the frame with the slower rate of vibration is further behind in projection compared to the faster rate. This is because it takes many more frames per second to create the illusion of slow motion or slower time. Far less frames are projected to create a faster rate of time and vibration. This would explain how and why, if one travels outside of a slower, dense reality for a few hours, days, or months, and return to their slower vibratory starting point, the perception of time will be drastically different. Another way in which time travel in this regard would be done is by way of ships operating by thought. The occupants would simply project their intent through the technology used to reach a certain location, and the ship would simply dematerialize from its present location to the location of interest. So again, there's really no time travel occurring here. I would say that it's more like time jumping or window jumping, whichever you prefer. Now, what happens when we jump into a past lifetime and create some kind of change within that particular timeline? If and when we go back and create something to change that what has already happened in the past, we will basically create another alternate or variation timeline adjacent to or parallel to the point where the change occurred. From there, we would have two parallel realities playing out side by side, and we are capable of eventually syncing our consciousness with any parallel reality seamlessly if we make a respective choice or interest to do so. This is important to point out because we really can't go back in time and change that what has already been projected and fixed in a time-space continuum. But we can go back and help to create a change in course and trajectory parallel to something that has happened in the past. This is also how trajectories and probabilities can be modified and thwarted. You see? And this again lends to the more fluid nature of reality. Now imagine everything that I've just shared occurring from multiple realities, probabilities, and dimensions infinitely. Truly mind-boggling, right? Well, that's it, family. This concludes this presentation. Thank you so much for this moment, and let's do it again real soon.